All right, welcome everyone. Today we'll be talking about digital source and how it's a new way to lower inventory costs and boost customer satisfaction using on-demand 3D printing. So beyond the title, I think there are a lot of different use cases for it as well, and we'll be discussing those during today's webinar. All right, let's get started. So on the agenda today, we will give an introduction to digital source. For those of you online, maybe you've seen some of the content that we've released. We'll go through that in a little more detail, how digital source works, and a number of the use cases for it that we've seen so far. We'll talk a bit more in depth about the results achieved by the early digital source customers, and then we'll have a little pause for halftime Q&A. That way we can get through some of the questions. We'll have a getting started with digital source session with the product manager, Laura, and we'll have a walk around in the product and show you some of the features. And then we'll have an open forum for discussion at the end. Introducing your hosts today, we are joined today by Trip Bird, who's the director of new platforms at Markforged. You might have seen Trip on a number of YouTube videos. Who he's explained the Metal X. He's coming from an application engineering background, and in the time before that was working in all sorts of different engineering consulting roles, a lot of process automation, and Laura is our product manager who's been leading the charge on digital source. She's like in-depth familiar with all of the features that we're building, the things that are coming, the things that exist today. She'll be able to talk more about what exists and what's coming. And I'm Charles Liu. You might have also seen me on some videos. I am an application engineer at Markforged. Recently moved to focus full-time on digital source, but still composite 3D printing is in my heart. So first up, I want to ask a few questions. So before I answer your questions, I want to ask you a few questions. And this is going to be related to what your interest is in digital source. So why don't we're going to start a poll, and no pressure, but it's a couple of yes or no questions. And I'm curious what everyone's here for, and this might help direct where we're going with today's webinar. So why don't we start the poll? I'm going to launch a poll. Hopefully this comes up for you all. All right, first response is in. First person wanted to access digital parts from the supplier. Okay. Let's see, 10 responses. Ooh, the yeses are going up. We got more people wanting to sell products today. So let's see. Yeah, I think while you're answering the questions, there are a number of different ways that you can use digital source. Some of them more obvious than others, and like what we think is a good application may not necessarily be the most prevalent application. So these answers are really valuable for us, and will probably direct the way that we build the product going on. So yeah, I really appreciate all of you taking the time to answer the questions. We're still getting some responses in, so I'll just give it a little more time, and then we can talk through a bit more about what the use cases are. And actually, I'll just move on to the next slide, and I'll keep the poll up, and then we can end that later. So if you're still taking the time to fill it out, thank you. If you have seen any of the launch content and maybe clicked on any of the links, a lot of them redirect here, which is the Access Digital Source page. And this is where, if you, after this session, have interest in getting on platform, you want to share parts, you want to access parts, maybe you want to offer print surfaces, any of the things that are on here as options of actions for somebody to do, if you fill out the form, we'll be able to get in touch with you and get you set up. So make sure that after the session, if you have interest in using digital source, that you get in touch through this web form. So next up, I'm going to pass it to Trip, and he's going to give us an introduction on digital source.
All right, thank you, Charles. So we're all here centered around this belief. We know that additive technology can provide huge value when it's deployed intelligently in the manufacturing environment. Shorten lead times, improve geometric complexity, lower costs, better agility. It drives value all over the board. However, adoption and realization of that value is sometimes more challenging. So what do we see as a hardware OEM or platform OEM here? And we're working with customers. we see that adoption and the realization of that value takes some more time. In many cases, it requires an engineer to actually go out and identify applications, what do I use this technology for? Once you've identified that, now I've got a design. I have to maybe modify existing CAD or take 2D drawings and convert them into 3D files for printing. There's some iteration and labor there required. And then I'm replacing existing technology. I'm replacing materials that have been the same for 100 years and designs that have been proven with something of a new material, a new method of manufacture, and a new design all at once. How do I validate that all of this is an acceptable substitute for what I know works? These are all things that need to be addressed before additive can be deployed at scale. It's not a barrier, but it's certainly a restriction. It's a limiting factor that is preventing the rapid growth. That said, people are designing new products every day. People that offer products, they know exactly what their goods need to do. They know what the designs need to look like. This platform is a solution that allows original designers to provide the value that they do to their customers out in the field with the added advantages of additive, the faster lead times, the lower costs, all the things that we know additive does very well, now is paired with the existing relationships between your supply chain. That's where Digital Source comes in. Digital Source is an on-demand platform for 3D printing OEM certified parts where and when they're needed. The where and when they're needed part is really what additive is great at. Distributed manufacturing. I need this part. I want to get it quickly. I don't want to wait. I don't want to deal with the minimum order quantities and procurement and all the things that we know adds extra barriers in the traditional supply chain. 3D printing is a great solution. Now, if we can connect that with the OEMs that already understand what a design needs to look like, what temperature it needs to operate at, or what number of cycles it needs to survive, all of that is IP and information mastered by the OEM. If they can provide the where and when with the parts that they already produce, that's a better solution for everybody. And Digital Source now is the connective tissue that provides the trust and security necessary for parties today that already interact to exchange via this new mechanism. So how does it work? We take the Markforged platform, our digital forge with reliable, repeatable hardware, industrial materials, and an easy-to-use cloud software. That's something that everyone's familiar with, the results that people are getting off it, the parts, the ease of use, the ability to collaborate internally, all the things that you do today with Markforged provide an excellent backbone. To make this suitable to bridge the gap between different organizations, we need to add a few more things. IP security is critical. The existing solutions out there, digital inventory is not a new thing. We need to transform that, and IP security is a critical component. There's no downloading CAD. There's no Dropbox or sharing files back and forth that once they leave your control, you have no idea what happens to them. That's a broken process today. Telemetry, how do I know that this part is being created in a way that matches my standards? Is the material right? Is the machine in tune? All of these things, they're easy to monitor when it's me making the part, but as soon as I'm pushing it out into the world, I need some guarantee that although I haven't actually hit print and pulled the part off the bed myself, I need to know that this part is meeting my standards and is an acceptable part for people to use in production critical applications. And finally, why change? The reason all of us go to work in the morning is to make some money. So if we can provide a platform here that provides increased margins, improved profitability, and also lower costs for the end user, it's a win-win. And that's where connecting those two with the reliable ecosystem that creates parts now provides a platform that moves from a printing ecosystem into a supply chain solution. That's where Digital Source is really differentiated, and we think provides an extreme amount of value for the users that are on board. And as it grows, we see this thing continuing to pick up. OEMs offer parts via Digital Source. Great. We've got customers downstream that are benefiting from shorter lead times, better agility, no minimum order quantities, all the things that we want to avoid. Now they're able to do so without having to redesign parts and staff their own engineers to recreate stuff that already exists. These now digital source libraries are adding customer value. You're able to benefit from all of the perks of additive without having to saddle yourself with all the burdens of redesign responsibility yourself. You adopt it. It's adding value in your factory floor. It's streamlining your production. You're able to better serve customers overseas, whatever works. That is driving expansion. We're seeing users out there that have had great results on a point basis. Now they're scaling that across the business. If I can do this well at one location, why not push this down to other facilities, either within my organization or outside? You know, I've got a network of suppliers, I've got a network of subcontractors and contract manufacturers. Let's push this value beyond my four walls to maximize the advantages that we can achieve. As we do that, it gets more exposure to more OEMs. And we're seeing that some companies are pushing uphill. They're saying, I've had an excellent experience with digital source. I'm getting better parts, faster lead times, lower cost, but I've got 10 other suppliers, you know, building packaging machines for me or providing spare parts for my tool room. I'd like to get more from them. Let's get more people on the platform and add more value. And this is where the wider the footprint, the bigger the benefit for everybody. And we're seeing pockets of success that are starting to scale and grow on top of each other. So this is moving from, you know, okay, I've got a part, I need it in one location. Now I can deliver this in 10 locations. Value goes up. Or on the user level, I want to retool my line. I've got a printer. I can start going to work and getting parts ready to go. But to retool all at once, let's say I need 1,000 parts. Now, more printers are on the network, more printers are available. And what used to be maybe printed a state away is a city away and then a street away. And now it's the machine shop down the road. As this grows, the value continues to go up. So we're seeing that early adopters are easily providing success, but then as it grows, the value continues to increase. And how does that all work? So part design owners are at the top. They are the ones that understand what can be printed, can create the designs, and then validate that these new printed designs can meet the functional requirements of their applications. They are the best ones suited to do that job. They're the ones that are designing and manufacturing parts today. Great. Moving to a digital solution allows them to streamline costs, reduce overhead, reduce inventory, and still maintain extremely good customer service. They are hosting these digital libraries in digital source. It's important to note that this is not a one-to-many sort of eBay type platform where everybody can play. This is a closed business-to-business solution that just moves your existing supply chain to a digital model. In these digital catalogs, the part design owners can share with selected customers. Customers are onboarded. They've been granted access to controlled libraries. These libraries then can be accessed by the end customers. They have the ability to purchase print rights. They're not open-ended licenses to use the CAD. There's no CAD being exchanged. There's nothing being sent out of my control. These end customers have the ability to purchase licenses to print the files without having to do the design work, the validation, the redesign all themselves. They're not waiting for lead times. They're not working through procurement. Then they can get these print jobs and route them either to printers on their factory floor ready to go or through a network of print service providers. This is where, again, we're not emailing CAD. We're not sending an Excel sheet with every layer setting. Oh, I need fiber here and isotropic infill there. It's a secure print file that's encrypted, cannot be modified, cannot be copied, cannot be recreated. So it's a better work experience, a better workflow for everybody involved, and the end customer is getting what they need. They're getting lower cost, higher performing parts without all of the traditional supply chain complexity. They're getting the right part on demand. An additional feature that will be coming ahead is the support for design services as well. There are plenty of design owners out there that are getting pressure from their customers. Hey, I'd love to be able to use a digital source or digital inventory type model. Can you send me digital files? They're interested, but they don't have the time or the expertise in-house to maybe redesign things. You know, if it's been cast for 100 years, Now I got to move to printed metal. What does that look like? Well, there are plenty of experts out there experienced with Markforged that can provide professional services to streamline that workflow. And again, being hosted all in a secure encrypted platform means that files are protected, IP is protected, and the right skill sets are connected with the right need. So from a customer point of view, what does that look like? Or from a user's, you've got an OEM here, let's say located in Europe. In this case, they are creating, they're validating files. They are designing things that they know meet their needs and the needs of their customers. These are then shared in digital catalogs in digital source. Different customers around the world are granted access, and this is in a controlled environment. Nobody outside this bubble can see the catalogs, is aware of their existence. Different customers can have visibility into different catalogs without overlap. Then these customers have the ability to browse and get access rights to these files as needed. They're having on-demand, on-location parts without all the complexity. And additionally, network of print services providers are plugged in. These customers that may not have, let's say, an FX20 to produce the largest part possible for a big assembly, but once in a while they need access. They can onboard a print service provider, so then routing a job becomes as easy as it is today, sending it to the printer on my desk, except now I can send it to an approved supplier down the road. Sorting and tiering these suppliers by ISO standards or security, things like that, is additional functionality that'll come, along with the ability to institute quality control checks. Laura will go into more detail there later, but that's a major differentiator here. This is not CAD being sent out into space. This is a closed end-to-end feedback loop, security and telemetry to prove that these parts meet the needs of these applications. So all this is interesting, but what really makes it real and what really makes it valuable is the differences between your conventional procurement model to shifting to a digital platform. Everything you need is always in stock. The lead time is however long it takes to print. So in some cases, you've got nothing on the shelf, you need it, you print it. In others, it's maybe a production critical part, you can't stand to have downtime, you keep one on the shelf. Something breaks, you've got the spare ready to go, and the next one's queued up for printing. It keeps your business optimized and lean, but without having the shortages. There's no need to stock, anything that could break in minimum order quantities and lead times. You look at the amount of excess inventory that sits on the shelf, and in some cases, you're paying inventory taxes on that every year. And 10 years from now, maybe it's depreciated, it's obsolete. It's been sitting there the whole time, wasted. Move it to a digital model. Everything you need is there when you need it without the overhead. Then on the lead time side of things, right now, we all know what procurement looks like. And on the production floor, you're making parts. You want to be able to plan your production schedule. When you have random requests coming from customers, hey, I need this spare part, what do you got? In many cases, it's a fire drill, let's stop, let's change our production schedule. We got to make 2 of these for this one customer. Okay, fine, you can do that, but it adds time, it adds costs and complexity. Then on the delivery side of things, international shipping, packing, procurement, handling, all that's a pain. Customers know what they need, now they have the ability to browse and self-serve. And then when you look at the financial overhead of inventory and opportunity costs of what this money could be otherwise spent on, you've got major advantages as a part producer or part owner, as well as a customer downstream dealing with volume forecasting, procurement, all of that. So we see this as a major enabler, and some of the customer value out there that is being realized today is it's fantastic. So in line with that, we've got a pilot customer, BMF, a machine builder in Germany that is on board and seeing some great results. We'll share a quick clip for those who haven't seen it.
Normally we print about 150 parts each week for the customers and only for spare parts. Normally our customers have to wait about 14 days to get the spare parts in their factory. And now, thanks to digital source, now we can collapse the time from 14 days to 1. Today we printed over 21,000 parts from Markforged. Can you imagine how much time we can save, how much money we can save, and how much personnel costs we can save when we use digital source?
So that's one customer's experience. The results speak for themselves. We're seeing this pockets of adoption, pockets of value being realized everywhere. And this is what we're very excited to see continue to grow. On the Markforged side, we have tens of thousands of customers. A lot are on this call. We're happy to have you. An advantage here is that this network, this install base already exists. Your customers may already have Markforged machines ready to go. There are probably already machine shops in your neighborhood that can provide parts. This is not something that we need to build from scratch and try to get everybody to come together. This is a capability that the Markforged ecosystem is, excellently equipped to deliver. Now that we've built the work on the software side to provide the security and connectivity across organizations, we don't even have to build something new here. We just need to enable this functionality and turn it on for our users. That's where we are today. All right, Charles, you want to take us through a couple different examples?
Yeah, thanks, Trip. Let's see. So there are, as I said earlier, a lot of different types of use cases for digital source. And what I'm going to do is maybe break down the BMF use case in a little more detail, and then talk through some of the other potential applications. And maybe as you attendees on the call have ideas of how you might use it, throw that into the chat, throw that into the questions, and we'll see if that, we can have a discussion about it. So digging into BMF's use case for spare parts, just a reminder, as questions come up, we're probably going to answer them in like the next 5 minutes, right? So we'll have the halftime Q&A, but yeah, throw those into the chat when you have them, or use the questions feature, and we'll review those right after this. To give context on how digital source works, it's maybe helpful to get specific. So let's focus on this scenario, maybe involving BMF, who is the OEM in the diagram, who's based in Germany, and customer A, who is a company who owns several BMF twister units for processing cast machine parts, and they're based in the US. So on each of the twister units, as you saw in the video, there could be maybe like 10 of these rotating, up to 10 of these rotating assemblies, each composed of like 5 different parts, which are in this processing chamber of essentially like an automated sandblaster. And so they're exposed to abrasive media, and the parts are changed anywhere from 3 to 4 months for heavy users, or between 6 to 12 months or for standard users, and maybe even less frequently for light users. So yeah, to show you what that looks like, these are some of the gears that are used to control the motion of the parts in the assembly. So you'll see, like, these are example parts, right? These are parts printed on Metal X, but they're in the system that are being turned and put through the abrasive media. But all the black parts here, with the exception of this one, are Onyx printed parts, and those are the ones that are actually in the chamber, taking on a lot of the brunt of the abrasive force in the chamber. So I'll talk through a few of the different attributes of what digital source offers to them and kind of go through them one at a time. So BMF's use case is mostly for routine replacement of wear items, right? So these are parts in an abrasive blasting chamber. But customer A recently had a situation arise where a part was not properly affixed to the fixture. So it came loose, ended up damaging one of the rotating gear setups. So digital source was then used to deploy a replacement part overnight. So the machine was down, but then was up and running within 24 hours. So the digital inventory model offers some obvious benefits, which I've kind of listed here, and I'll kind of go through them one by one. So first up, maybe with speed. right? So let's see. In terms of speed, speed and effort kind of go hand in hand. So I'll reveal both of those right now. Both BMF and customer A have the goal of getting replacement parts into customer A's facility, right? So whenever customer A needs a replacement part, their goal is to get the part into the facility. So simplifying the process steps on both sides and limiting the time parts are in transit means that customers can get the part. Customer A gets the part faster. Since there's no packing, shipping, customs, and other paperwork to fill out, it's also lower effort for BMF. For customer A, licensing and printing parts can happen in a few clicks. So it's instead of sending emails back and forth with purchasing, this also takes time off, takes burden off of BMF's operations team, right? So they who also have to kind of go back and forth. So it's a number of clicks and you can start the print rather than having to kind of go back and forth. For folks who've worked with international suppliers, which is something I did in my last job, you've probably been online at midnight, early in the morning, just to move business along. And for companies like BMF, who's based in Germany, but whose operations team is not that big, we've got customers around the world, being on call for customers can be pretty difficult as well, especially when you have a small team. So the asynchronous ordering process means that customers can help themselves to replacement parts while BMF still gets paid for the engineering design work that they do. In terms of cost, both sides can reduce the capital that they have tied up in spare parts. Tripp mentioned this earlier. Instead of keeping 10 years worth of supply on hand, buying that all up front, you print them as you need, right? You keep one on the shelf and you print them as you need. So customers can have one backup set on deck and then print the next one after the scheduled maintenance cycle. So in this case, this was for a replacement part which they didn't have, but it was I guess it was a part that they could print relatively quickly, right? So within 24 hours, they're able to get a replacement. So, but this also in turn reduces the number of parts that BMF needs to keep on hand for new customers, right? So imagine that before this model, every customer was saying, well, I'm going to come in and order somewhere between 3 and 5 years worth of replacement parts because that's what I get in my PO, right? So BMF would then have to stock all those parts. Each of the customers stocking the parts, they might not end up using them for a number of years, right? So that's capital that's tied up in spare parts that could be doing something else. But everybody's kind of invested in this and they have to do that. So as a result of moving digital inventory, customer A's printer is able to produce these parts. And I think one of these sets takes somewhere between 10 and 15 days to print. But they've got the rest of the year or rest of their allocated maintenance period to use that printer as they see fit. And what we've seen is that as the printer goes into facility and they start using it, there are a lot of different use cases for it. And maybe it's to support another piece of equipment, right? In terms of waste, conventionally, when parts are machined or formed in mass quantities and a design change is made, your inventory either needs to be reworked or scrapped, which results in pretty significant waste. So with a lean physical inventory and no tooling, like by moving to a digital model, BMF also has the flexibility to improve designs over time. They can also ensure that when design changes are made, customers have the latest version of their next maintenance, like they have the latest version of parts by their next maintenance cycle, simply by updating the parts in their catalog. Finally, in terms of flexibility, so customer A thankfully has a printer, right? They've got enough parts that they need that justifying a printer purchase was pretty easy. So they receive the full benefits of on-site printing, which is all of the things that we've seen kind of above, right? It's you get the parts within, you can start printing within the same day. You could have parts within the same day or the next day. But for some customers who are just starting out with BMF's equipment and don't have a printer yet, the in-region print services providers can get parts to those facilities without, it won't be quite as fast as having the printer on site, but it'll get the parts there pretty quickly, right? But wait, there's more, right? So say customer A has a more urgent job to run and the demand for their printer surged. Maybe it's for making other parts. They could also contract a print service provider to produce the BMF parts that they need, right? So BMF designs all their parts to fit on the Mark II, but in the case also maybe in the case that they need a custom part made on a bigger machine, they could contract out to one of the PSPs who maybe says has an X7, FX20. So with the added flexibility to produce parts for BMF machines anywhere in the world through digital source, BMF can punch above their weight, right? They can service and grow into an international market with less upfront investment by manufacturing and distributing parts local to their customers rather than from a centralized location. Cool. Well, that was a lot, but here's some more. So what we just went through was the production MRO use case, right? This is spares and replacement parts for your customers. And, we talked about that in the context of BMF, but Digital Source simplifies and reduces the cost of getting spares and replacement parts into your customer's hands. That's the gist of it, right? So if you're a manufacturer of packaging equipment, for example, the use case might be for wear parts like you saw in BMF's use case, but maybe you're in warehouse automation, could be parts for your robots and conveyor systems. So essentially any part that needs routine or maybe even unpredictable replacement could be a candidate for that. Another use case, let's see, in product distribution. So this is like pushing new or updated parts to a network. So an example here that is we've seen some trends and interest in might be an automotive OEM pushing parts to their dealer network, right? So particularly for service centers or of specialty vehicles, say RVs, off-road vehicles, where customization and adaptation for accessories is more widely requested, an OEM might want to push the dealer network to use the official OEM design parts instead of going with a third-party aftermarket part. Digital Source is a way to allow that without having to invest the capital up front. Another use case for automotive distribution might be tools or fixtures for supporting non-routine service, repairs, or recalls. So things that come to mind might be drill jigs, fixtures, or mounting brackets are some of these examples where tools are not commonly available, but are needed in a short period of time to address like a major concern. So while the average consumer may not have the need for a full Markforged 3D printer in their garage, I mean, I would love one. The global distributors for certain consumer or prosumer goods like drones and UAVs, lighting, CCTV, appliances, or other high-end audio might benefit from producing certain parts or products on demand. And in the case that a distributor doesn't exist, it's even possible that the print service provider has, like our print service provider network, has the ability to produce and ship parts on their behalf. So if you have, to put this more clearly, if you have a distribution network globally, rather than producing those parts, warehousing them at your facility, shipping them out to your distributors, and then having them, they then have to pay tariffs and all that, and you could potentially have the distributor have printers and access to your catalogs in Digital Source and produce those parts on demand in region. Oops, pretend you didn't see that. Another use case might be customization and retrofitting. So this is use cases that could extend functionality of an existing piece of equipment, or maybe extend the lifetime of some equipment that maybe is considered legacy equipment. So this could be anywhere from repair parts for classic cars to retooling an automotive assembly line to accommodate a different vehicle model. So for the OEM, Digital Source means that it's possible to support this aging equipment without investing capital in a brand new system, right? So for an engineering firm, maybe that sees an opportunity in the aftermarket repair and retrofit business, the benefit Digital Source offers in this application is that it protects the design and engineering work that went into developing the solution. Lastly, there are manufacturing partnerships. So in situations where the OEM works with a contract manufacturer, Digital Source can be used to ensure that the correct tools are used in manufacturing. This could be, an example might be aerospace engines. Those are produced in certain facilities, but then they were kind of reworked and overhauled around the world at different airports, right? So airport engine overhaul tooling for service centers could be an example. At Markforged, quality control gauges for our contract manufacturers as well. That's like a use case that we've already started seeing. If you have an AM center of excellence, for example, also, you might have branch locations where you want to distribute parts. The AM center of excellence has the knowledge and expertise to design the parts, and they can deploy those parts out to different branch locations. So if you have a kind of a centralized hub of engineering talent who is doing a lot of the reverse engineering or design for manufacturing, they can then deploy work out to the places where they're needed. That and, other types of continuous improvement, jigs and fixtures, those are all, this is by no means extensive. I think it is a lot of things that I just went over, but we're curious what you see as applications, right? Like this is just us kind of seeing it from a 10,000-foot view. So with that, we're gonna go into the halftime Q&A. I see a number of questions in here, and maybe we can answer some of them live. Let's see. Trip, Laura, anything you see in the questions that you want to answer live?
Yeah, for sure. So we can start at the top. Stephen asked, will there be an ITAR compliance option? So Stephen, it's something that we're considering. There isn't one available today, but we are interested in exploring it and better understanding how customers would be able to use and leverage digital source, and how they would do that if ITAR compliance was an option.
Cool. Next question up. Terrence asks how many major equipment OEMs are on board. And I think since this is fairly new for us, we are still in the early stages of discussion with some of these OEMs. As you saw, kind of the use case with BMF is a pretty clear-cut one, but in terms of feature development, for getting to the needs of like a Cat, Komatsu, Volvo, those might take time. So it kind of comes from both sides. It could be from, in some cases, we're having discussions with the major OEM, and they might want parts from their supplier network, right? But in the case of some of the suppliers, maybe they want to push up to the OEM. So this is still stuff that we're still having discussions on.
All right, Jerome asked what type of read-only file for the printer is set up for each order and required for printing, for example, filament, continuous filament if needed, inserts. So hopefully this will be even more clear after the next section in the product walkthrough. But what you're creating is a locked build file compiled with other information, including print instructions. All of that includes information about printer type, material type, print settings. And that bundle of information in a digital file is what we're calling a product. And products are what you sell in Digital Source. So hopefully that answered your question. And if you still have that question after the product walkthrough, please ask again, and we can continue to clarify.
Cool. Next question. What are the dimensions of the largest component that your largest printer can produce? So that I don't cite it incorrectly, largest printer that we have on Digital Source today is the X7. So that's like immediately we can do the X7. But as far as Markforged's largest printer, FX20, that's like, oh man, I'm gonna say this wrong.
I looked it up. It's on our website. So the build volume is depth and height are 400 millimeters and the width is 525 millimeters. And you can look at the build dimensions on our website by looking at the X7 and the FX20.
Yeah, and if you're in Iger today, you can upload the part and slice it for FX20, right? So if it fits, it fits. Cool. Elisa says, I don't know if I understood everything correctly, but my company has no owned parts to share with customers. We don't use Digital Source to work as, like, could we use this to work as a print service? Yeah, I think that's a good use case for it. And depending on what type of work you do, you may be suited to be either like a kind of a regional provider of print services, or in some cases, some folks might want more than just printing the part out, right? They might want assembly. And if your company is adept at doing assembly, say putting in inserts and then like assembling with like sheet metal components or something like that, there's definitely value add there. So depending on what type of work you do today and you have expertise in, you might be suited to be like a specialty print service provider. So yeah, I think even if you don't own a lot of the IP, print services are definitely a way that you can get involved.
And I think I'm not sure exactly if the question was about being a print service provider or using a print services. And so just to, on the other side, in addition to being a print service provider, you will be able to print your own parts through connected print service providers and digital source. So if you have design parts, but you don't have the hardware, the correct hardware, or enough capacity to fulfill a job, you'll be able to connect with the digital source network of print service providers to help you.
Yeah.
Similarly, there was a question around what's needed to be a print service provider. So as Charles mentioned, we are just coming out of our beta experience with digital source and moving into production ready software. From a print service provider side of the digital source product, it's something that we're entering into beta stages with shortly. And so we are, I think at a minimum, we're looking for companies who have multiple Markforged printers and are interested and able to provide high quality service, both printing, tracking, post-processing, shipping of parts. And those will be the first print service providers onboarded to the platform. Over time, we can imagine a world where anyone with a printer could sell a spare bandwidth and capacity on the platform, assuming maybe they've passed some certification or have other requirements met.
Let's see. So how does part distribution work if it requires further assembly of other parts in conjunction with 3D printed parts, such as press fitting, dowel pins, or embedding? Is that up to the customer to procure those parts? It kind of depends on, I think this is still a open-ended discussion for us. Right now, the easiest way for print services to work is to produce the part, put it in a box, and ship it to you, right? And that for some products might not be enough. So some of the like value added work that a print service provider could perform might be what, as you said, inserting press fits, dowel pins, heat set inserts, doing additional work, might be post-processing, right? You might want a surface treatment on your part, might want it Cerakoted, or maybe you want to go through AMT Post Pro, that sort of thing. So there are value added services. And if you have an idea of what types of services you'd want, obviously, I think you can send those in as a comment or in the chat, or let us know. Those are things that we can definitely consider.
And just to add on to that, if some of the post-assembly is simple and you think that your buyer who you have a relationship with is able to complete it, what you're able to do is add post-processing instructions. It could include information about exactly what parts they need to order, if they need to pause and insert something, what to do after the print is complete. And so you are able to provide that information along with that product package if it is simple enough for them to be able to do on their own.
All right, I think we're getting through most of these. Aaron, you've got some questions which I think Laura will be able to answer during her product walk around. And then we have, I guess, maybe one question. Here's a question: is Elon going to take your product to Mars? That's kind of up to Elon. And then, what's in it for the print service provider? How is the profit being shared through the process? Laura, you want to answer that?
Sure. So, as I mentioned, we're in the process of building out this part of the platform. Our early conversations indicate that for the print service provider, there's a few benefits we're providing. One is a much more streamlined process of actually sharing files directly with the printer, so they don't have to reslice, set print settings. They can simply just press print. Another is really lead generation. So some print service providers have to spend a lot of time finding new customers, and by connecting with digital source, there's a breadth of customers in the Markforged ecosystem that they're connected to. And so both of those things add a lot of value. We are in discussions about having transaction fees for each print order through the print service provider.
Cool.
Yeah.
I think there'll probably be a couple more questions about print services. Why don't we move on into the product walkthrough, and then we'll make sure we get to those questions at the end.
That sounds great.
Cool.
Oh, I think I double clicked. Let's see. Sorry. Okay, so Once you're enabled as a digital source vendor, so a digital source vendor is the organization that has print designs and wants to design them for 3D printing and sell them on digital source. Once you're enabled, you have a new area in the platform called the warehouse. And as a vendor, you're able to manage your products, who you share them with, and track your orders. And so what does creating a product look like? When you're on a build file, you'll have a new button called Create Product. And what we're doing is we're taking all the settings that you've set and we're locking them so that they can't be changed. That includes materials, it includes layer height, it includes infill. Anything you've set on the build gets locked and then hidden as well, or obscured from the buyer, so they never see the details of this. One thing of note is, as a vendor, you should, just like you would sell your physical parts, you should do design iterations, you should print it, you should test it, you should make sure it's a part that you're willing to put your brand promise on before you sell it as a digital file, just as you would before you would sell it as a physical part. I mentioned that the product that you're selling is a combination of this locked build file, in addition to information such as photos, documentation where you could provide printing requirements like we talked about. You could also provide information and drawings that say, like, please measure this specific part after the print, so we know that it printed within specification. It has the material locked, the printer locked, and here's also where you're able to set a price. There was a question from Erin about what the average price is. What we're finding from the customers we're speaking to is that they're charging about 50 to 80% of what they would charge to send a physical part. So if the physical spare part was $100 and that included them printing it, shipping it, using the material on the printer, they may charge anywhere from like $50 to $80 for the right to print that as a digital file to their buyer. Additionally, here, I just want to point out that the vendor has control over some pre and post print requirements, including material assurance, hardware maintenance, and part quality. I will dig into this a little bit more in a few slides. So as a vendor, you're able to control which products you share with which customers through catalogs. You're also able to view orders and fulfillment status. So there's a few things I can point out here. This toy down at the bottom, this is kind of a demo account. You see that it's been fulfilled, which means the buyer has purchased it and printed it successfully. Up here, you can see another toy that I like to print for my kids that hasn't been started in fulfillment. And then in the top line, you're seeing that something must have gone wrong on the buyer side. So they're actually requesting a reprint. Reprint is intended for, for whatever reason, the print didn't print as you expected, and the buyer wants to try again at no cost. You can approve this reprint if you want, but that's totally in the vendor's discretion, and they can have conversations with the buyer to understand what went wrong and why this is being requested. So as a buyer in Digital Source, you're able to browse products shared with you from connected vendors. You can look at the product details that were set by the vendor. You can add them to your shopping cart, and you have two different payment methods, both credit card and direct invoicing. What you're actually purchasing as a buyer is the license to print this part on your own hardware one time. So you have the difference between an air intake valve, $300, and a toy for $5. In both cases, you're able to add them to your inventory. Once they're in your digital inventory, you're able to select a printer that's compatible, that is in your own IR organization, and start printing, and you can track that printing as well. So I want to come back to the quality assurance aspects here. So as I mentioned, the vendor can set the quality assurance, and this platform ensures that the buyer complies with this in their printing process. So material assurance is saying a buyer cannot print your product unless the printer has the right material loaded. This is always on. We don't allow this to be turned off. The hardware maintenance check is saying that you can only print with devices that are up to date on software and maintenance items. So if I'm a buyer and I'm trying to print on a printer that isn't on the right software version, I won't be allowed to do that. And then part quality confirmation is really kind of a verbal consent that says, I did the instructions, I measured the right parts, it looks correct, and I'm saying that this part was produced as you intended, as the vendor intended. All of this is about building trust in the platform so that the vendor can trust their brand is represented correctly and the buyer can trust they get the right part, even if the buyer is printing all over the world and not where the vendor doesn't have control on their own printers, which is what they're used to. Just a quick note that we are creating a traceable digital record in Digital Source, and the buyer can add a serial number and look up that digital record with a serial number if they choose. Lastly, next week, you'll actually see an in-Eiger demo experience, which is the Markforged vendor catalogs. You'll notice that there's a warehouse section in the bottom left navigation of your Eiger instance. You'll see the Markforged vendor catalog, and then you can browse those catalogs, for instance, for parts like demo applications. So the goal here is to have the experience of a Digital Source buyer where you can add parts to cart, you can purchase them, it's in quotes because all the parts are free, and then print them on your own devices from inventory. We'll also have a robust in-software education to help you learn and understand the value of Digital Source and start to think about, would this be valuable to you as a buyer? Who are the vendors that you want to buy from? And if you're on the other end, if you're someone who sells and is interested in selling digital parts, you can think about, okay, here's what the experience would be. What would it take for me to get my own vendor catalog on the Digital Source platform and start selling parts, digital files directly to my customers? So I'm going to hand it to Trip to wrap us up. And then I think there's a few more questions if there's time.
Great. Thanks, Laura. So I hope this has been valuable for the attendees here. We're very excited to share where we have the platform today, as well as where we're continuing to build. This is going to be a maturing product as more and more features and functionality are added. We're building that in response to feedback from early adopters, early users, as well as inbound interest. So please, submit the form that we have on our website, provide some feedback, bring ideas to us, bring vendors to us. There was a question about Komatsu and Volvo and CAT. We're working with all of them. We're in discussions. There's great interest here, but in many cases, we need the tide to rise together. It's a more compelling argument with us as an intermediary and buyers and sellers, customers and users coming together and asking for this together. So that's where we are. That's where we are today. But all of the users, all of the people on the platform stand to benefit here. It dramatically improves profit margins for designers. You're no longer having to pay to ship and handle and everything. Once something's designed, the hard work's done. Now it's high margin digital revenue. Customers are getting on demand, on location parts for lower cost, less lead time, less complexity, less overhead. They're being able to solve high value problems with additive the way they'd like to, without all of the burden of the design. And then on the print services side, this is an enabling function that allows people to benefit from this without having to lay capital. You get a workflow improvement, you get access to new customers, and you get an opportunity to continue to grow your user base here. So we're very excited to see the early success that customers are bringing today. We are very interested in having discussions with other interested parties. If this is something that you think might be relevant, or you've got some questions you want to run by us, we're more than happy to have a discussion. Please reach out and we can review this together. So we'll use the last few minutes and go through some of these questions. There's a question about average price, or how do you value the digital files? That's a great question. It's important to consider it as a value-based product here. There is no one size fits all. How much is the workflow improvement worth to you or to your customers? What is taking lead time from 2 weeks down to 1 day do to them? What does international shipping and handling cost them today? So we're seeing a wide range. Some customers are selling these components for pretty low cost, $5-10. Others are selling it for nearly the same price as the physical product that they used to ship. But because of the supply chain improvements and the lead time improvements and the lack of international shipping, things like that, the value to the customer is still quite high. So it's very part specific and use case specific, but we are working with many of our users here to help educate and refine the best answer there. What's in it for the print provider? How is the profit being shared through the process? So on the print provider side, it's important to decouple the access to IP and the access to print services into two separate sort of mental transactions. If somebody is buying access to a part file, think of this as the the iTunes model. You've got artists on there that are creating products. Markforged is Apple. We're an intermediary that is hosting and enabling this transaction, and they have end users down there that are buying parts. Then, once you've purchased the rights to access that, do I want to play it on my printer that I have here, or do I want to send it to something down the road? That is a separate transaction. So for the print service provider, that is a separate quoting engine that is up to the print service providers to define. So it could be multiples of material cost or print hours times an overhead. Whatever you'd like to do, we are supporting several different mechanisms there. We're in early discussions with some of our beta candidates to make sure we're considering all the right variables and all the right buckets that people would like to organize. But it's very much defined by the print service providers. And the goal here is to focus on quality and high value solutions. This is not a race to the bottom, put my thing up on the web and try to get the lowest cost possible. This is which provider is qualified in my network to provide the solution that I need. Once we've both agreed that we are, onboarded, we've signed NDAs, you are my approved provider. Now we've got a quoting platform that allows you to transact. So quality is important here. This is not a race to the bottom to commoditize manufacturing. We are trying to preserve the value here, which also considers the certifications that providers might bring to the table, or their ability to do post-processing work, or other components, laser marking, assembly, whatever is necessary to create these products as a finished piece. That's important. Will a customer have access to limited personalization of the part? So today, no. The OEM, the person who originally designs that, is responsible for defining the functional characteristics, locking in all of those variables. If in the future we see some interest in people that want to be able to modify or alter components, we're certainly open to that. We're actually seeing interest on the internal side where customers and companies are using digital source within their own organization. Let's say you have a center of excellence that is pushing approved products down to different factory locations. It's all within, let's say, the same automotive OEM, but different locations have different levels of access. That could be an example where maybe a different site might want to personalize a part. We're exploring that, but today, no, it's locked and unable to be modified.
I can answer Blake's question. This might be a good one to end on. So Blake asks, is it fair to say that this would be a pay per print type of service where the OEM gets a cut, Markforged gets a cut for providing the platform, and the end user gets a part on demand and pay for each time that they print the part? And so Blake, that is exactly right. That's what we've shown today. Just a note that we do have other options for pricing if the transactional per print model doesn't work for you and your supply chain partners. So feel free to reach out and we can talk more about that.
Yep, great comment. All right, well, thank you all. Please reach out. Let us know how we can help. And we hope that this provides some extreme and growing value to you and your customers.
All right, cool. Thanks, y'all. Have a good rest of the day, or evening, or afternoon, morning.